Welcome to the Mama Needs a Moment podcast. We are your hosts, Chrissy
and Cindy,
co-founders of Her Health Collective.
We are two moms obsessed with changing the way moms take care of themselves. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in. We are so glad to have you all back for another episode of Mama Needs a Moment. And we are joined today by two of our very special moms, Kandria and Lindsay, for a mom chat episode. And we will be discussing neurodiversity in adults, as well as partners, having partners that are neurodiverse and how that fits into our lives. So these conversations come to you. They're not scripted at all. It's just a mom chat because we thought that it would be great to capture these casual conversations on specific topics, just like if we were out to dinner, if we were having coffee, drinking wine, or on a walk with another mom. And we just felt like it was important to share this with all of you, our listeners and mom friends out there. So hi, Lindsay. Hi, Kandria. Thank you for being here.
Hi.
Morning.
It is the morning, by the way, when this is being recorded. So everyone's a little, good morning.
I was like, should we have wine during this chat when you were talking? It's like, we should have all poured ourselves
Mimosas,
a glass.
perhaps?
Yeah, it is 10 a.m.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
5 o'clock somewhere.
My first question to you all that I'm curious about, because you all know me, I lead the way with curiosity and questions all the time. What does neurodiversity mean to you? How do you define it in your lives?
This is Kandria, and I'll say that for me, I just think of it as just a different kind of brain. Like my brain is just functioning maybe a little bit differently than somebody else's. That's kind of what I think of it personally. I've researched about it, just for my own experience. And I just kind of think of it as my brain's just a little bit different. So that's what I think of it as.
Yeah, I agree. I sort of think of it similarly, like it's a different way of viewing the world. It's a different way of interacting with the world. There are certainly things about it that make it more challenging, but there are, particularly having a husband and a child who are also neurodiverse, like there are some wonderful things about the way I find it easier to see like the cool ways that they interact and view the world than to think about it for myself. But to see the way that my son processes things and it's really cool sometimes. But of course it does also come with challenges when your brain and the way that you work and the way that you think is not necessarily what works best in a lot of environments that are set up for people who are not neurodiverse.
Right. So, Lindsay, you're coming from the perspective of having a spouse and child that's neurodiverse, correct? And then Kandria, you're coming from the perspective of someone who considers having a neurodiverse outlook on life. And I am that perspective as well. I consider myself also neurodiverse. And that's where my next question comes from. So we are all different ages here, which is a blessing. We find that having moms of different ages is such a blessing because we get mentorship and get life from different perspectives. And age really doesn't matter when you get beyond a certain point in your life, right? I was diagnosed with a neurodiverse brain when I was just getting into college. So this was a long time ago, y'all. My diagnosis came in the late 90s, but I always felt different. I always knew that I was interpreting the world differently. And my diagnosis came as OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, when I was in my 20s, early 20s. But I always viewed myself as being different than others. Why am I different? Why am I processing things differently? Why are other people finding things so much easier to absorb than me? Why do I feel like germs are a bad thing for me? And why do I just obsess over these different things? And so going into my life in the time period when I was diagnosed, it was not well known. Neurodiversity has come a long, long way over the past 20, 25 years, so that it's still has a bit of stigma to it, but it's definitely not like it was when I was diagnosed. I mean, there really wasn't even the label of OCD when I was diagnosed. So I kind of grown up throughout my life as feeling like I need to be fixed or that the medicine is going to fix me. I wasn't able to really embrace the fact that I take in the world differently. The messages that I got was, I'm doing it differently, which makes me wrong. I'm wrong to have these different feelings. And I'm just curious, Kandria, I'm going to direct this to you. Have you found something similar to that experience based on whether you have a diagnosis or that you just know that you think differently and absorb differently? What is your feedback on that
Yeah,
experiences?
so I think for me, it's been a little bit different experience only because I just within the past like 5 years or so have sort of sought out some more resources around, in my case, ADHD and things like that. Although throughout my life, I always felt I knew about ADHD. My mother has ADHD, but couldn't really get it together to really understand or research more about it. And then the past 5 years after I had my daughter, which can be really normal for some mothers, is that any sort of neurodivergent symptoms can increase in motherhood and
Yeah.
things like that as well. And for me, that was my case. And I finally sort of had the resources and maybe some more time or just ability, financial resources to really seek out a therapist to help me understand and things like that. And so for me, I was much, much older than my 20s before I really even talked to somebody about it to really talk through and understand what my personal experience was. And as I've sort of discovered, this difference with my brain, I've really realized, oh, well, I've made it this far in my life with this and have, had successful relationships and have a job and things like that. And so even though I've sort of recognized, okay, this difference within myself, I've really been able to sort of accept it and say, well, and as Lindsay said, there's some benefits to a different brain and there's different things that you can do. I'm good at so many different things because of the way my brain works. And so, yeah, it's been a little different experience for me because I was so much older and sort of recognizing these differences within myself. And I had also kind of figured out over that long period of time how to sort of hack my brain and get through, this world with a different kind of brain. And so I do feel like I accept maybe better just because I've just been dealing with it for so long with no resources, and
Yeah.
no understanding of it and sort of just figured it out on my own. So, yeah, I think it's been a little bit different experience for me, Cindy.
I think, Kandria, also something that comes to mind as you're talking is how often young girls, their diagnosis of ADHD is missed because it
Exactly.
presents so differently. And so much
True.
of the research has been on boys, and it's just a totally different way that it shows up. So I think that that would be very common for a lot of women our age, that it was kind of missed or, pushed to the side, and then it's only coming to light now.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. And I definitely, was not jumping up in my chair as a kid and super hyperactive, but I internalized a lot of things and I was inattentive and all of those things that can easily be missed in girls. And we want to please, right? We're natural sort of people pleasers. And so you're right, Christy. I definitely think that in my case, that's something that probably wasn't recognized when I was younger.
I agree. I actually, like, I don't know, Cindy, if you know this, but I was diagnosed with ADHD too only a little over a year ago. And I
Oh, no, I
remember
didn't.
I remember
Wow.
describing it. I'm trying a new medicine right now. Very tingly. You know how when you first start to take like a new
Hmm.
stimulant, I don't know if you take anything for yours, but you're a little
Me
bit like,
too. Yeah.
my brain feels a little bit like it's like, but I remember describing it to the doctor. As a kid, I did really well in elementary school, very
Me too.
successful, great grades. And then
Yeah.
as soon as I hit middle school, I really started to struggle, especially with grades, getting assignments turned in. I would have a lot of anxiety about things. If I had a lot to do, I would get like frozen and not be able to do anything. And she said, yeah, that's all textbook ADHD. I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad that I'm finding that out now at 37, and it's
Yeah.
been 25 years of this.
Yeah.
Have you
So,
noticed
but we do
that
find
it's
ways to cope, you know, like
Yeah.
Kandria was saying, like we, particularly women, I think we find ways to mask it really well, even though our
absolutely,
inside our brains are like freaking
Yeah.
out. It's like the duck
absolutely.
that looks calm on the surface, but underneath we're like paddling, paddling, paddling.
That's so true. Socially, we can adapt to the surroundings, even though inside, you're right, Lindsay, we might be racing. And what's really interesting is when they couldn't peg what my diagnosis was years and years and years ago, they were like, it could be ADHD, which was kind of a new term that was coming about at that time. And my mom's like, she's definitely not hyperactive. So that's just to show you that people go in thinking that it's that label. But what I wanted to ask you was if yours has, I did the same thing as you all. I compensated really, really well for what was happening internally with me. Although some of the things when I was younger did come out as compulsions. So I had things like washing my hands. I was terrified of death. I had different things that I would do to try to control the anxiety that I felt inside. But as I've gotten older, I don't have, it's not manifesting in the same way. I don't have these obsessions and compulsions. It's coming out more as my thinking. I get just stuck in my thinking when I'm trying to do things around me. I can, like you were saying, Lindsay, I could stall or get very overwhelmed easily. I'm curious, have either of you noticed that over the years, yours has just started to show itself in different ways?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, after I had my daughter, it's it's interesting. And really the past few years I've found what's changed. I really do get sensory overload. And my daughter is very rambunctious. 5-year-old. She's loud. She's, you know, she's jumping off the walls. And for me, I can get really overwhelmed with, noises or things my husband's doing. He likes to pat things, he has weird things that he does. And I just recently had to get those loop earbud things to wear in my house. That has really helped with sort of that background noise, but that I didn't even, just over the past few years, I've sort of realized it's manifested in sort of this sensory overload that I didn't recognize or before or has worsened or something. So yes, Cindy, that's something new that I've definitely recognized that I've had to address for myself.
It reminds me, have you seen that meme? It's from the perspective of a mom, and it's like, I heard too many sounds at once, and now I'm a bitch. But
Yeah.
like when you just get overwhelmed, like
Yeah.
people yelling in the car, people trying to get your attention, and you're like, okay, I'm freaking out. Yes, I totally understand that. It's funny because I find a lot of like my son's ADHD, how it manifests itself with him, to be very triggering for me. Like he loves to run back and forth in the house, like just sort of galloping in a pattern back and forth, back and forth. And that, it's not even like I'm worried he's going to get hurt. It's just like for some reason that sound and the running just like raises my cortisol level or something. I don't know, but
Yeah.
it does. It's like overstimulating for me. I'm like,
Yeah.
I just need you to stop, or I need to
Yeah.
leave the room, something.
So much of what you guys are all describing, Cindy mentioned overthinking, Kandria, you mentioned sensory overload, Lindsay, you mentioned being triggered. I identify with all of these through my anxiety. I don't have any diagnosis as ADHD, but definitely a very anxious person. And I read an article recently that said some people are arguing for anxiety to be included as a neurodivergent mind state. Basically, it was a very interesting article. And in listening to the three of you talk about it, I can see a lot of the parallels in that sense, because when you're overthinking and have this sense of sensory overload, your brain does function differently. Like you hit this thing where you are triggered and you can't think of anything else, and you can't process information the same way because you're stuck in this thought loop, and it's just overthinking and ruminating and going on and on. So not everybody agrees with that. It was an interesting article.
I've also read, there's a lot of the research around ADHD saying that a lot of people with ADHD have comorbidities of anxiety, depression, or they were first diagnosed with anxiety and then it determined that it was ADHD or depression or vice versa. So I definitely think all of that is correlated, can be correlated, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to go under the umbrella. I mean, I feel like the neurodiversity umbrella is pretty wide, and it can get wider to fit other things under there. And I think anxiety, there are, just like with ADHD or other neurodiversities, there are certainly things that make it more difficult to interact with the world, but there are things that, I don't love calling things like that a superpower, but there are things that can be benefits from things like that. Like I'm always prepared, like when we went camping a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, I've got the first aid kit, I've got every medicine over the counter if anybody's
She pulls
got a
out like
headache or diarrhea,
the bee venom remover.
Yeah,
she's got like creams to make like itches go away. She's got pills for that. She was prepared.
Because I envision the way all the scenarios could go wrong, like that's the way my anxious brain works. I'm like, okay, what terrible things could happen? What do I need to prepare for that? That was one of the ways that, for me with anxiety, my therapist would have me sort of think about, okay, is this anxiety rational? Is it irrational? Yeah. And if it's rational, let's come up with a plan. And, sometimes I might take it a little far, but like if it's rational, like you're going to a new city, you're going to a new experience, okay, and you're anxious about that, which seems very reasonable, then you make a plan. How are we going to navigate that? And the irrational anxiety is something I still struggle more with on the other side. That's something that takes different skills to deal with. But yes, I'm certainly always prepared for any illness or
Lindsay,
scrape or bee sting.
To our Patreon supporters, thank you. We appreciate you so much. Our goal has always been for moms to know they're not alone in the tough and challenging phases of motherhood. We know Mama Needs a Moment provides this to our listeners.
We are thrilled with the growth of the podcast over the past 2 years. Last year, Spotify shared that Mama Needs a Moment was in the top 30% most followed podcasts, was heard in 9 countries, and had more content than 97% of other creators in the family category.
We have recently launched a Patreon account for Mama Needs a Moment. This is a great way for you to provide additional support to Her Health Collective.
We've set up 3 options for Patreon supporters, each with its very own perks, such as special events, discounts, and bonus content from each and every podcast guest that is available only to our Patreon supporters.
Will you become a Patreon supporter? It would mean the world to us. Yeah, when you mentioned anxiety and a superpower, I was like, where is she going to go with this? Because I do not see the superpower.
No, it does not.
You are right. You are right. You do tend to be prepared for every scenario, and you think through every outcome of what could possibly go wrong and have your different avenues to handle that. I do also want to touch on living in a household with a partner or significant other, not children, because we're going to save that for another episode, but living with another adult that is neurodivergent. And that has its own host of issues and challenges because you love this person, and also they can drive you absolutely crazy with some of the things that they do. The top one that comes to mind is in conversation. I'm in conversation and I'm talking, and I literally watch as their eyes his eyes don't leave me. His eyes are still on me, but I can see like his consciousness go elsewhere. I watch it happen and I'm like, hello. And I mean, I'm pretty efficient when I'm talking to him. I know I'm not rambling. I know I'm being to the point, but it's just like, if it's not something that's interesting him in that moment, he's gone. And that can be incredibly frustrating. So I know, Lindsay, we had talked about this. So what do you see? Like, do you identify something, an extra challenge in your home, and how do you navigate it?
I mean, there are a couple different things that we do. So one thing, so Adam has ADHD, my husband, and he has sensory processing disorder, particularly around food textures. The way we handle that is that he does the cooking. So I don't have to worry about things that he won't eat. He's got a lot of food aversions. He does the majority of the cooking when he's in town. And he also tends to like doing the cooking as well. So we play to our strengths with that. I don't particularly like to cook. So that's sort of an easy fix for that. I don't have to worry about making meals that I know he's willing to eat, and he seems to enjoy it, and he can make things that he knows he will eat. The ADHD can be a little bit trickier because, like you said, it can be really frustrating when you're trying to talk to someone, tell them something that is important, and you feel like they're not listening to you. He's also very reactive, so like if I tell him something like an idea, he might like immediately just go with no. He'll say something first and then process it. So sometimes I'll, if I've got an idea or something that I want him to think about, I'll lead with that. Like, okay, I'm going to throw an idea out, and I just want you, before reacting to it, just to think about it for a few minutes, and then we can talk about it. But that also means that I have to remember to say that before throwing out ideas. So, and that can work pretty well sometimes, and it's making sure that if I do need to tell him something important, that if he is in the middle of something, that I remember to say, like, okay, when you're done with this video game, I want to talk about something, or can you pause whatever you're watching or whatever you're doing for a moment so that I can have your attention? So yeah, it's just sort of being mindful of that. And also it's hard because, well, for both of us, at the end of the day, you're both tired, we've all sort of reached the end of our self-regulation rope. And, we have child with ADHD, 2 adults with that. And so knowing when to tag in for the other one for parenting, knowing like when, okay, our child's behaviors might be triggering you a little bit, and you've sort of run out of your, well of self-regulation and your ability to like regulate your emotions. So I'm going to tag in and help out. So I guess being able to recognize that in each other and read each other's cues and tag in when necessary. And also knowing when to ask the other person to tag in, because sometimes they might not be in the room and you're like, I need you to take over for a minute because I need to go. I need to go yell in the other room for a second so I can continue to be a good parent in a few minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, variety of skills that we use successfully most of the time. We all have our slip ups and things like that, but when we remember to use them, it can be very successful.
I'll say one more thing my husband does that I really appreciate. And, there can be a lot of like shame and guilt around neurodivergence, and he's very good at not making me feel bad. And I really, really appreciate that in him. If I forget something or I continuously lose my phone and he has to call it, and it's just like so annoying. And I know that sometimes it can be annoying, some of the things that happen. And he's just really good at, finding humor in it and really, really just holding space for me, not making me feel bad. And so for anyone, who might have a partner with ADHD, just think about that, because that can really go a long way. Because I know for myself, I already feel bad about certain things that I do. And it's very helpful that I don't have someone, making me feel worse.
Oh, I love that. That's such an important message, I think, for all of us to hear, both if you are someone with neurodivergence and if you
Right.
live with someone with neurodivergence. I think that's a really powerful message. Thank you for sharing that, Kandria.
Yeah.
When you all told your significant others, so my husband and I have been together for 18 years, married for 17 years. And I remember when we were together and things were getting serious, and I was like, I've got to tell him that I have OCD, it was this, okay, gulp, I have OCD. And just the response was, oh, okay. But I thought it was so much of a bigger deal because it had been stigmatized so much more for me. And the stories that I created about my worth around it were so much stronger. And he was like, whatever. Did you all find that? Like, did you have this big introduction period with your spouses or your significant others?
I think at the time when I was realizing like how bad my anxiety actually was, like this was long before any ADHD, but I would say like for the anxiety side of it, that was sort of going on like while we were married. When I was like, probably we've been married for about a year, when I really started struggling with it quite a bit because of a triggering event. So I've always had anxiety since I was a kid, which I didn't really realize until I was an adult that that's what that was. So he was there. He was there for that. And, you know, he actually helped me find a therapist. And it's funny, we call her like the family therapist because she was my sister-in-law's therapist first. She was Adam's therapist. She's been our friend's therapist. She's got the whole backstory. So that's who I went to see. And I see her individually. We see her as a couple too. So yeah, I mean, he was very supportive in the sense that he recognized that I was really struggling quite a bit around the time when I was 30, after having struggled sort of on and off with the level of my anxiety for my whole life. I was particularly bad right around then. So very supportive in helping me find someone. And I would say the same, like, you know, we were together when I got diagnosed with ADHD too. And of course, he's very familiar with that already. Yeah, it sort of shows up in him a little bit differently than it shows up in me, but clearly already very understanding of what that means.
Did he tell you about his ADHD when you first met?
We actually worked together for a long time before we were dating. So I met him when I was 21. He was 26. He'd been diagnosed with ADHD since he was like 7 years old. So yeah, that was always something that was sort of in the forefront. He's got no shame about telling folks about it. It's not something he's ever felt the need to keep hidden. And honestly, if you've met Adam, it's not something I think he could hide. So So yeah, I don't remember a specific conversation where he told me about it, but I just feel like I've always known that about him, you know?
Yeah. Chrissy, did Noah have to come out and like say anything to you about it? Or was it just no?
So we've been together for 20 years and we were in college. I have no recollection of him ever voicing that. He's never been treated for it, like very clearly has it. I think he might have been diagnosed when he was younger and maybe took some medication when he was younger, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But I don't remember a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember when we started living together, like after we were married, it might have been mentioned in passing, but I don't know. After 20 years together, it's just like who he is. I don't even think about that. I just know that that's who he is and how he operates. And like Lindsay was saying, I know that there's certain times of day that are better to talk about certain topics. If, you know, it's an important conversation, I'll wait until after our daughter is asleep and we are relaxing or doing, like, there's just certain times of day where it's better to broach certain topics. And I don't know, but that's being in relationship with anyone for a long time, right? There's things about me, like he knows when not to, if I'm emanating a certain energy, just don't right now. More on the anxiety side. So
I find that interesting. I just really find it interesting because I remember having a hard time with it. He probably doesn't even remember the conversation.
It's the stories we attach to our own struggles and what we're navigating. So it's the stories that we build up in our head about it. Absolutely.
I do want to underscore, I think, you know, what everybody's brought up is really important about the shame aspect of it, because I do feel like there can be a lot of shame when it comes to, and I know in particular, that's like sort of a hallmark of ADHD is feeling that shame because you feel like you should be able to get the job done, get the work done, remember things, not leave things behind. Lord knows I love to leave things behind. So you do feel a lot of shame about that. So I think it is important to talk about that, you know, you're not alone, that it's not your fault, and that, you know, that particularly with your spouse and the other people in your life giving you grace and you extending grace to others as well is really important. Like you were talking about, Kandria, like your husband is really understanding. And I try to remember that, you know, when I feel frustrated about something with my husband that I feel like might be a result of his ADHD, like to be understanding. So I think that was a really important point that everybody made.
Also, you know, from a mom perspective, and that's where I feel a lot of guilt is, you know, when my daughter says, "Mommy, you weren't paying attention," or something like that. That's when it feels really hard. And really being open with your kids too. You know, I had an experience yesterday at the playground where I was like doing something on my phone. I was texting somebody. My daughter's talking to me. at the playground telling me something that happened and I wasn't paying attention and it went completely out. And then I recognized that and thought, oh gosh, I didn't hear. I have no idea what she said. Like, no idea. And that's not just ADHD. I mean, we all do that. Moms do that sometimes. And I took her when she came back. I said, hey, sweetie, I said, I'm sorry, mommy was distracted. Can you just tell me again what you said? And she did, and she was fine. And just being open and honest with your kids if they're old enough, you know, to kind of grasp that and just say, sometimes mommy doesn't pay attention all the time, or I lose track of things or whatever. And so I do try to be kind of open with my daughter as much as I can. And that's helpful too. And I think helps as well with sort of the guilt and shame around it also. It's just helping her understand too.
Yeah. I think it's interesting as you were talking about this idea of shame, I went back to how particularly ADHD shows up differently in boys and girls, and that it was much more easy to diagnose historically in boys because of just the way research was done. And it made me kind of wonder if boys, men that have ADHD, if they feel the same degree of shame that I think a lot of women might present with, because totally generalizing here, but they probably had a diagnosis earlier at a younger age and perhaps treatment or, you know, but it was also, it's just kind of like, oh, he's ADHD. And it's this sort of this, especially in the education system, like it's just this explanation. And I feel like girls in a lot of ways, generalizing here, but had this inner thing going on that was something they were navigating in their brain, and they're still showing up in the world and working extra hard to be what society says we're supposed to be, but not feeling like they're showing up like everyone else around them. And I wonder if the shame shows up the same in, you know, for both boys and girls navigating particularly ADHD, just because of that gender difference with regard to how it shows up. Just something.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that
That's
makes
a
a
really
lot of
good
sense,
point.
Chrissy. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because even the differences in diagnosing kids that are on the spectrum, boys versus girls, and that gender difference, it's the same thing. It's all, girls are a lot more internal, a lot more emotional. Theirs comes out more emotionally, and
which is often considered normal, quote unquote, normal for girls too. So it's harder to see, I think, in a lot of cases.
And then there's also a lot of overlap with these different diagnoses. Like someone that's on the spectrum can also have OCD behaviors and ADHD behaviors. I mean, it was like that with our daughter. She originally was diagnosed ADHD, and then as she grew more, we were like, well, I think she might need to be evaluated again. So we took her back, and then she had tipped over slightly onto the side of being on the spectrum. And so had we not caught that, I mean, we wouldn't have realized, I mean, even the professionals didn't catch it at first, right? Like it was just interwoven within everything. So,
and there is a lot of overlap with those two. With ADHD and autism as well, you'll see symptoms that are similar, and you can also have both. So
yeah, and with the sensory processing, all of that, it's all part of it too.
And I don't. Your question is really interesting, Chrissy, about the shame and when it comes like the differences between men and women. To talk to my husband about it. The only thing he's ever mentioned in terms of that is that when he was a kid, he felt othered by having to go up to the office and get medicine, because it was back in the day where they didn't have extended release. So he had to get it every 4 hours. And so, you know, in elementary school, he would have to get called up. And so in his brain as a child, it wasn't the ADHD that made him different. It was the fact that he had to take medicine that made him different. And that's what he didn't like. So, but beyond that, I don't know that we've ever really talked about his feelings about it. And I do feel like and it might be different from when he was younger, because I do feel like he's much more open about it now than he used to be. So he's certainly not shy about telling people about it, that he's got ADHD. So yeah, I wonder, I'll have to
chat with him. Let us know.
And I can get him to not be looking at his video games. Like, okay, we're gonna have a conversation. I want to talk to you about shame, like Brene Brown.
It's gonna be a deep one.
You gotta time that one, right?
He's gonna love that one. Yeah, he's gonna love that. My husband's favorite thing to do is talk about his emotions.
I couldn't read that.
Maybe we can talk about them.
Was that sarcasm or genuine,
Yeah,
Kandria?
that was sarcasm. That was sarcasm.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I couldn't read it. I wasn't sure. This was such a good conversation. Thank you both, Kandria and Lindsay, for taking time and being open and vulnerable. I know this is not a comfortable topic necessarily. I think we're moving in a direction where it is more easy to speak about. Thankfully, that's a wonderful thing, but it's still vulnerable. So thank you both for being willing to share with us and opening up and joining us for our second mom chat. It was fun.
Thanks for having us.
We've enjoyed hanging out with you today, friend. We hope you got to finally enjoy a hot cup of coffee as you listened. Make sure you follow us so you're the first to know when we drop a new episode.
If you've enjoyed your time with us, let us know by leaving a review. We always love hearing from you. Until next time, stay true to you.